it is my great pleasure to introduce Yissachar, who is the Vice President of Research and Content at the Israel Defense and Security Forum. It has another name, which is practically unpronounceable in English, Habithonistim, right?
Right.
How good was that?
It was perfect.
He leads the research department and he oversees the organization's media and publications and major events. He is a specialist in Israeli national security. He has briefed every level of government person in Israel and Knesset members. And well, I didn't realize there was a door on that side. Okay. He has served in Unit 8200, which some of you know about in Israel. And he holds degrees from Tel Aviv University. I love this. His Tel Aviv University degree is in music. He also went to Sciences Po Paris and has a degree in international security. He has worked before at INSS and in Austria's AIES think tanks. He's published extensively. He has published everywhere that one would think he should publish, in Israeli papers, in Newsweek, and he appears online and in the media everywhere you think he would. He also hosts IDSF's podcast series, Security Talk. He speaks 5 languages. We only need one. We'll take English. And we will do, as we normally do, we will do Q&A at the end. He is going to talk to us for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We'll do Q&A at the end. And if you are online and you want to send a question, we are still monitoring the Q&A line on the web. So it is my great pleasure to have Yissachar talk to us. Tell us what we need to know.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shoshana. Thank you for that kind of introduction. I think we can wrap it up there because the best part is behind us. Thank you very much. I hope I marry that. As Shoshana mentioned, my name is Yissachar. I'm Vice President for Research and Content, Israel's Defense and Security Forum. It's a forum founded by General Amir Avivi 5 years ago. We already have 40,000 members. It is led by hundreds of senior ranking officers, retired and reserve. And our mission statement is to secure Israel for generations to come, not for the next 5 minutes, but for the next 5 generations. This kind of strategic thinking has been sort of bereft of the Israeli decision makers, in our view, for too long, or at least insufficiently. And so it's our mission to talk to them and to the public to promote these ideas. They often say Israel does not have a national strategy, so that we took the trouble of crafting one, and you're all very lucky to receive one yourselves, at least the executive summary, not the full-on 400-page version. And as Shoshana mentioned, I'm also a classical concert pianist. Very unfortunately for us, we're not going to hear me play today, just talk, but that would be, I hope it'd be good enough. Usually when I give morning talks, I stand in the way between people and their lunch. So I'm very glad that you guys are nourishing your stomachs right now. Let's also nourish our minds, I hope. They say the army marches on its stomach. So I hope we can all enjoy that. And I'm here because I was hoping to talk for about 25 minutes or so on the war in Israel, what it means for Israel, for the United States, and the free world, and what's next for us. Because then we can open it up to questions. Because on October 7, 2023, 6:29 a.m., Israel was changed forever. And it was a moment in time where we thought it was just around another, what we called a round of conflict or round of fighting between Israel and Gaza. I remember myself waking up 6:29 a.m. to the sound of sirens in central Israel, texting my boss, whom did we kill in Gaza? Because probably when the IDF is taking down certain Hamas or PIJ commander in Gaza, the immediate response would be rocket firing and then rocket launching. That's what we thought it was all about. And then images starting coming of pickup trucks in Sderot and the Nova Music Festival. Little did we know that at that very moment, Israel was changed forever, and they would take the ripple effect across the globe, not just a small little local conflict between Israel and Hamas, but what we call the first Israel-Iran war. It takes a ripple effect across the globe, not only between Israel and Hamas, but an Iranian ecosystem across the region from Gaza, Lebanon, Houthis, Judea and Samaria, militias in Iraq, territories in Syria, and Iran itself launching over 500 projectiles at Israel for the very first time in history. And of course, colluding with Russia and China against the West in general, attempting to assassinate President Trump. Formerly, they attempted to assassinate former Vice President Mike Pence and the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C., plotting terrorist attacks against Jews, Israelis, Americans all across the globe, launching rockets, missiles against American bases in the Middle East. So that's Iran, and that's the danger emanating out of it. And so what happened, as I said, on October 7 had impacted Israel directly, but has also resulted in what I call the new Cold War. It is not just in Israel that the free world experiences some hurdles, and it's also in Ukraine and around the world. In my view, Hamas was hoping to do what Haman was hoping to do about 2,000 years ago. We're in Passover, but that was in Purim, trying to exterminate the Jewish people as a whole. That's their mission statement. And he was hoping to do what Hitler was hoping to do prior to Operation Barbarossa, of course, the Holocaust against Jewish people. But when I talk in strategic military terms, Hamas was hoping to do to Israel what Hitler was hoping to do to USSR, June 22nd, 1941, which is we will slam that door open and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down. That is to say, we will take a surprise attack. There will be shock and awe. Israel will crumble, and the world will never be the same again. There are several similarities between Hitler's ideology and that of Hamas. As we can see with the swastikas, they were prevalent all across their publications. Mein Kampf in Arabic, printed in Iran, found literally everywhere, in every single home in Gaza. In educations, my friends were combatants in Gaza, found in every single home a copy of Mein Kampf, one, and number two, the entire land of Israel. They call Palestine. So that is their mission statement. And of course, both of them used the pleasures or the services of the West or Israel or the Jewish people in order to promote themselves. Hitler's direct commander was called Hugo Gutmann. He was Jewish. He recommended him to get the Iron Cross signed. That he bragged until the very last day of his life. He wore it on his suit. Hamas's Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, was incarcerated in an Israeli prison for many years, as you know. Had a brain surgery in Israel, saving his life. Had a brain cancer. Saved his life, came back to prison, and I remember distinctly talking to Betty Lahat, she's the commander of the prison, a very tough woman, and she asked him, we gave you everything you wanted. What's the problem? I mean, is there any way that we can somehow get along? Why are you back to terrorism? And what he said was, well, that's your job. Your job is to save my life. My job is to fight you. That's really not the Western mindset that we're used to. And so we're facing a moment where not only do we have a conflict with Gaza, but as I said, a multi-pronged attack by all of Iran's branches. Gaza, Lebanon, Houthis, Judea, Samaria, Iraq, Syria, and Iran itself for the first time in history, linking to the greater global conflict. But also, what I would say is that war is a laboratory where we are constantly tested between good and evil, between those who choose good and those who choose evil. Not necessarily evil themselves, but those who behave, let's say, rather than a shepherd, behave like a herd. What we saw, for example, in U.S. campuses, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. A decree declared as anti-Semitic by the U.S. Congress and by the ADL. We saw how it is very easy, quite scary and easy to affect hearts and minds of young people where they're not aware of the facts. And so this is a moment in time where we ask ourselves, probably the reason why we found ourselves in this magnificent little hall today, to ask ourselves a simple question: what's next? All right, we had a war. October 7 happened. We had a year and a half of infighting in Gaza, made significant results. 251 taken hostage, of which 59 remain in Gaza, and we pray for their swift return home. We have significant achievements in Lebanon. Reality was changed there for good. We do hope, I'll get to Lebanon, but we do hope for a significant political change in Lebanon. I'm half Lebanese myself. My mom there came to Israel from Beirut in 1969, right after 2 years after the Six-Day War. So maybe one day we'll go back to live in Beirut. I don't have such plans, but we could definitely have some sort of a trip with my friends in Israel who have Polish or Romanian ancestry, have the pleasure and privilege of doing. So we may end up doing that one day. But the bigger question in my mind is not Hamas, but Tehran. What's going to happen with Iran? Because we keep talking about Iran and its nuclear program and how it sort of exploded the entire ecosystem of terrorism in Israel on October 7, and probably started to regret this as soon after that. What do I mean by that? Hamas was hoping to sort of have a multi-front surprise attack against Israel. October 7th, 6:29 a.m., 6,000 terrorists swarmed through the border, and they were hoping that Hezbollah would join. Hezbollah did not join until, you know how long it took them? One day, 24 hours, starting slowly drip drop of rockets against Israel. So far, they launched 30,000 rockets against Israel from Lebanon. 30,000 rockets. But that did not happen in one day. And certainly that lost the element of surprise. Israel was ready. 300,000 people woke up, went 7, 6, 7, 8 divisions were laid out across the border, in the north, in the south. That's it. The element of surprise is gone. And so Hezbollah started launching rockets and sort of pretending to participate, as we call it. But at some point, Hamas was furious at Hezbollah, reportedly, for not taking a more active role on the morning of October 7. Had Iran directly attacked, and Hezbollah directly attacked, and with their elite units, and Judea and Samaria would be on fire, then who knows what would have happened to the Jewish state. But that did not happen. So right now we're facing a more stable reality, but there is a sort of a crossroads ahead of us, right? This inflection point in the war where we pose a big question mark, what's next? So Gaza will be handled, Lebanon will be handled. More importantly, the domestic situation in Israel should be handled to the way to bring more unity to the people. But then strategically, we'll look eastward to Iran and its nuclear program. And the big question is what avenue we're going to choose, because Iran is continuing to enrich uranium, and it's not going to stop unless it is stopped. It reminds me of the story of the group of cats, or a group of mice, who were hiding inside a hole from a cat inside their own little hole. They were hiding, and they were sort of debating whether or not they should go outside. And they say, well, if there is a cat, how do we know? And they were all debating, and they said, you know what? Here, I have an idea. One of them said, I have an idea. Whenever a cat comes, it's gonna wear a bell. And then we're going to hear the bell, and we know if there's danger, and we shouldn't leave. We should go out. Say, great. Now look at each other and say, all right, who's going to bell the cat? Right? That's the dilemma right now. Who's going to bell the cat? Namely, who's going to take on Iran head on, and what avenue will we choose? I can tell you right now, we find ourselves in a situation where Iran is more dangerous than ever before, enriching uranium to quite alarming degrees. 60% enriched uranium, according to the IAEA, International Agency for Atomic Energy Agency, and the USDNI, Director of National Intelligence. All these reports tell us that Iran is enriching uranium in an unprecedented scale, and is 1 week away from sufficient fissile material for the first nuclear bomb. That means that it is only a matter of choice and not a matter of capability. And so Iran's leaders now are sort of laying a gun on the table, have become a nuclear threshold state, and say, we may or may not develop nuclear weapons or enrich to a weapon grade of 90% enriched uranium. It's our choice, and now let's see you dealing with it. If there's one thing that cannot happen, is that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. That has been quite a consistent policy of the United States across the board, bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are saying that. The only question is, at this point in history, what kind of avenue will we choose? Will it be a preemptive military action against the nuclear facilities? Will there be some sort of a deal that would make the Iranians sort of give them a ladder off the ledge and sort of give up on their nuclear program? But to know that, we kind of have to go back and recall what we're facing. On October 7, we were also reminded, as I said, who's good and who's evil, who's the Senate. It's a little bit like after the 9/11 the disaster or trauma in the United States, big tragedy with the collapse of the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and the fourth flight. And so in Israel, it is very accustomed, sadly, to terrorism. Learn to deal with it. But that morning was different than any other morning. Over 1,100 Israelis, almost 1,200 Israelis, as well as Americans, British, and other nationalities, were killed. 251 were taken hostage. Victims ranged from a 14-hour-old infant to a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor. Across the board, Israel was ill-prepared for war. 119 breaking points through the fence. Dozens of townships and kibbutzim were completely occupied. IDF bases. What Hamas did was unprecedented, not just because of the sheer scale. It was the deadliest terrorist attack in history per capita. One of every 10,000 Israelis was killed. Unprecedented in history. In total, that was the third deadliest terrorist attack ever in history, after 9/11 and an ISIS attack on an Iraqi Air Force base sometime in the past decade. So this is unprecedented at any scale. But what Hamas did was not only invading by land, but also using Iranian drones to drop grenades over all the lookout systems of Israel. The system was supposed to automatically identify and shoot down any invaders were completely neutralized by grenades. And then came 4,000 rockets in a single day. In one morning, 4,000 rockets. And then 119 breaking points across the fence. And then 6,000 terrorists swarmed through the fence in 3 waves. Not just Hamas terrorists, but also Fatah of the current Palestinian Authorities, Mahmoud Abbas. Fatah terrorists wearing yellow, not green. And what we call sha'arin, or general citizens who just use the opportunity to swarm and storm Israel. The deadliest attack against the Jewish people anytime since the Holocaust. And so this behooves us to alter the existing paradigms. Namely, we cannot continue in the same path as we used to. It was very convenient for Israel and for its allies to sort of, kick the can down the road and sort of look for what we call a Band-Aid solution, like a Band-Aid when you put on a wound. It's not completely healing it, but that's okay so long as it doesn't bleed too much. And then that's it. We came to a point where it was no longer sufficient. Then in Gaza, Israel started fighting. And then the IDF recognized that it was completely blind to the challenge from Gaza over the past almost 2 decades. I don't know if you know this, but the 251 hostages, some of them were kept in apartments, not just by Hamas terrorists, but also by journalists and everyday citizens and doctors who were paid by Hamas. And one of the elderly hostages in Israel, 82-year-old, she talked to her captor, and he said, "What do you want? I need to pay mortgage. I need to provide for my family. Hamas pays me $600 per month to keep you hostage. That's great stuff. So I'm taking it." Right? Others were Al Jazeera journalists who kept Noah Argamani and others in their apartment. But there are also tunnels. How long is the DC metro in miles? What do you say?
Not that long.
Not that long. Just let's spitball for a second. 20 miles, 40 miles. 200 miles. 128 miles. All right? 128 miles is the length of the DC metro. Hamas dug tunnels over an estimated length of 350 miles. All right, so that's a big enterprise. The joke in Israel was that we should have taken them to dig the Tel Aviv metro because it took 50 or 60 years to do that, and they were proving incomparable efficiency in doing that. But then that was the main challenge. Had it not been for the underground tunnels in Gaza, what we call the Gaza metro, that would be a completely different ballgame. The hostages are now kept in tunnels, in cages, being starved, being tortured, in shackles, and so on. And the main challenge by the IDF is those openings of tunnels and all these places where they hid IEDs. They took multiple soldiers' lives. All these things are a completely new ballgame, and the IDF managed to reinvent itself during the war during the war, inventing technologies to tackle tunnels. I spoke to some of these officers, simply amazing. And so 5 divisions swarmed through Gaza, did what they could, and now Israel is back in fighting, securing the Egypt-Gaza border, the Philadelphia route, and we'll see what comes next. We can take it in the Q&A. Lebanon, completely different political reality. Hezbollah has been utterly decimated. Let's say 80-90% of Hezbollah has been decimated. Much of its firepower has been hurt, and more importantly, it broke its own promise to Hamas. Lebanon's Hezbollah said on October 8th, they said, we are joining what we call a struggle of sympathy with Hamas. So we start launching rockets, and we sort of have these this back and forth with Israel, launching rockets, sometimes all the way to Tel Aviv, and not just to the north. And we are going to support our brothers in Palestine. That's what they said. So right now, Israel is back in fighting in Gaza, and Hezbollah does not intervene. How come? Right? Assad's regime fell. So HTS is posing a brand new threat, possibly also an opportunity. We can talk about that. But the main threat right now is eastward, East Tehran. Who's going to bell the cat? What's gonna happen next? And so, if there's anything that unnerves me, and probably that's the last topic I'm going to touch upon before taking your questions, is not only the war in the battlefield, but also the war of information and the war over the narrative, as we call it. In May of 2024, the supreme leader of Iran had a speech where he thanked college students in America for their participation in the struggle for Palestine. Does not mean he's right. Most college students in America did not take any part of that. But to those who did, he recognized an opportunity to what Bezmenov, the KGB officer who defected to the United States, called ideological subversion. That is to say, to hammer away the fault lines inside the Western society to the point where you sort of break the Western society from within. And what the leader of Iran said was, Shoma aknun shachei as jabhei moravematra tashkil dadeid. That is one of the 5 languages that I speak. So he said that in Persian. Very unfortunately, he is abusing the Persian language that is beautiful. But what he said is that you are now forming a branch of the resistance front. Think about it this way, the resistance front. That is to say, unwillingly perhaps, but some of these young minds in America who have been very easily affected by the Bin Laden letter and all those things we heard about on TikTok, they also sort of felt compelled to participate in those riots in campuses, not sort of criticizing policy, but chanting from the river to the sea and all these things. Gas the Jews, one of them said. This is hardly criticism over policy. This would be more akin to anti-Semitic riots. And so what we're facing right now is the willingness by the radical axis to use these fault lines within the Western society. I don't know if you read the report by Andrew Roberts, historian, a very accomplished one. I recommend you listen to him. He's a British historian who wrote a report for the UK Parliament Commission on October 7. What he said, he focused on the denial and sort of the war of the narrative. He also spoke at length about the stats and all that, but he said Holocaust denial took a few years to take root in pockets of society, but on October 7, 2023, it took only hours for people to claim that the massacres in southern Israel had not taken place. We owe it to the victims to set down the ghastly, unvarnished truth. And so this sort of new dimension of war has become part of our reality. And what's going on in the United Nations is not helping. That is to say, instead of being the responsible sort of international body, deliberative body, where you sort of resolve conflicts in the conference room and not on the battlefield, that was the original intention behind the United Nations. And it has become simply a platform for zealots and dictators to what I call to promote a revisionist history. Sometimes even attempts to legislate truth or legislate history. By that I mean that The truths behind October 7 are subject to attack by this very body. Issuing the report by the Human Rights Council saying that Israel uses sexual violence as a weapon of war. Israel, of all countries, who absorbed and suffered sexual abuse as a weapon of war by Hamas, is now accused of doing the very same thing, accused of committing genocide in Gaza with no evidence, accused of using starvation in Gaza with no evidence, when hundreds of trucks per day leading tons and tons of equipment into Gaza, somehow it's considered to be a path of starvation. That would be a completely ill-advised way or inefficient way to carry out a genocide if you redirect the population to a safe zone away from a war zone and give them 500 or 600 trucks of humanitarian aid per day. That would be a particularly ill-advised way to carry out a genocide. And so all these things just to prove us that it is done deliberately, not done by any means to look for justice, deliberately in order to break the spirit of the West. I would just end with this, that we sort of are in an inflection point where we are looking for the right path, where we move next, this crossroads of the war, after there's all these great achievements and so on. And now we're facing the real challenge, which is the challenge in Tehran and what we're doing with Iran's nuclear program. I often say that action has a price, yes, but inaction also has a price. Right? That's the price of inaction that took place on October 7. The erosion of Israel's fundamental security paradigms that says you cannot have terrorist armies on your borders. Notice that I didn't call them terrorists or terror groups, call them terrorist armies, because these were what Hamas and Hezbollah had prior to October 7, were some of the most powerful militaries anywhere in the world. 150,000 rockets in Lebanon, and those military units that had special ops training in Iran, on Iranian soil, just a few weeks before the massacre, as was reported. That is unprecedented in history. And so you cannot have that on your borders. You cannot go on full-on appeasement mode with Hamas, hoping that they would somehow be appeased or sort of agree to a reality where they only have a few some sort of carrots that given them by Israel, 20,000 construction workers per day. That cannot buy it, because if your enemy's intent, very clearly stated, is to destroy the state of Israel, they simply go out and say it, like the leader of Iran. They use no subtext. They go right ahead and say it. We have an obligation to the victims and to ourselves to prevent the next massacre, to fundamentally change the reality in Gaza, and more importantly, to tackle head-on the change in Tehran. So this is a time of reckoning, and right now we're celebrating Passover. Opportunity to clean all the chametz, all the non-kosher things in the little corners in our cupboards. What sort of we are always pressured to do by our family. Nobody really wants to do it, but we go ahead and do it. But then, while cleaning, it is also an opportunity for us to clean, our minds as well. It has a very, very wise underlying meaning to it. Sort of clean our soul, do some soul searching, and look for a better future. And I truly believe that, in these inflection points in history, it teaches us who stands for order and who thrives on chaos. And we really are compelled at this point to choose the path of peace and stability in the Middle East, not by appeasing those who thrive on chaos, by tackling them head on. And with that, I'm very happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do questions. A point. Orr said that October 7th was the largest terrorist attack in percentage of population. To put it in American terms, we lost 3,000 people in 9/11. It's the equivalent of 43,000 Americans. I ran the numbers. 43,000 Americans. That is 3 9/11s. Right. So it's a lot. I'm going to take the floor and do the first question. Iran is, and Bob's going to get second. Iran
first. That's
Iran and its proxy Qatar are basically out of Gaza.
right.
Iran is basically out of Lebanon.
Right.
Iran is basically out of Syria. We are making sure that the Houthis have fewer and fewer resources. Even the Iraqis are getting tired of the Iranians. In your view, does that push Iran to go faster to a bomb? Because
Right.
before they kind of had this and they kind of had that, and does
Right.
this push them faster?
I think it does. I think 2 years ago, that would have been a bit preposterous to assume that we can go ahead and strike the nuclear facilities without serious ramifications. That is to say, just like Shoshana mentioned, Iran built all this wonderful, quote unquote, enterprise around Israel's borders for a reason. We're not there as an ornament, all right? Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, all those were trained to that end. And so, in my view, as its proxies are collapsing, its air defenses are reportedly have been badly damaged. So Iran really is in its weakest point in history. And so that could push them in a corner, say, if we're so threatened, we're going to go ahead and get the bomb. That could sort of unnerve them enough to do that. And so this really does compel us to think how we can prevent the threat in advance. In my view, 2 years ago, there have been sort of questioning, is the juice worth the squeeze? As in, you would take on the nuclear facilities, you sort of prevent it temporarily, and then you get all the raining down of hundreds of thousands of rockets from all your borders. Doesn't worth it. Right now, in my view, that's the only avenue. The Trump administration, in my view, is correct in sort of offering this fig leaf. Let's try to negotiate. You can choose the good way or the bad way. It's your choice. But in the end, as someone who reads Iranian media all the time in their language, they don't see it this way. Just like in the Oslo Accords, we're facing those Palestinians from the PLO who said, we are here to free Palestine. And we said, we are bringing law and order, like officers who would keep the law and order, completely different languages. So in this case, the United States say, we're here to negotiate a deal to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, and the Iranians are saying, no way in hell will we ever give up our nuclear weapons. We are negotiating in order to negotiate. That's what General Cooperwasser said, that negotiations for the sake of negotiations is a delay tactic to buy time and get the bomb. So this is what we really should be wary of. Please.
Wow.
Okay, you teased us about Lebanon and Syria.
Right.
Okay, are they reverting to where they were 2 years ago? Are they future Abraham Accord signatories? What do you think? And maybe more importantly, what is the Israeli government doing to affect the outcome one way or the other?
Great question, because in my view, Lebanon is not Gaza. Syria is not Gaza in the sense that as someone whose mother came from Lebanon, is ancestry there, and also came from Syria originally, so I can vouch for both of these. Gaza is comprised of 2 million Palestinians who are Sunni Muslim. They were educated by Hamas or formerly by the PLO. They're pretty much in the same mindset. Lebanon and Syria are not the same. If I mention how the Iranian leader is trying to sort of hammer away the fault lines within the Western society and create these sort of internal divisions, there it's extremely salient to see how in Lebanon you got multiple ethnic groups, in Syria you got multiple ethnic groups. Many of them are not particularly happy with Hezbollah or with Iran or with Assad. And they did not have an opportunity to actually express those resentments because of the fact that, well, a terror regime and Hezbollah was like controlling the streets and all that. Now Hezbollah has practically been decimated, but not entirely. There's still Hezbollah presence in Lebanon. In my view, it would be wise for Israel to sort of use that to our advantage with the help of the United States and France to build a different Lebanon where there is, according to the Constitution, that was never applied. One state, one army. No Hezbollah, no Iran. Southern Lebanon is demilitarized. You got the Lebanese army and not Hezbollah all across the country. And there you can have a different Lebanon. You mentioned the Abraham Accords. It's fascinating. I mentioned in an interview that thought I was completely nuts. That's all right. Thought I was completely nuts to mention it, but this could very well happen. Probably quite a leap at this very point, but down the road, for sure, I think that Lebanon is an option. Just mention about Syria. Since Assad is gone, Israel has been openly even trying to sort of bring the Druze closer to its sphere of influence. I hate to use this term because it's more of an Iranian and Turkish term, but Iran is gone from Syria. Turkey is in. What worries Israel is that Turkey would be replaced from being an Iranian sort of parrot or sort of a puppet state or a proto-state into a Turkish proto-state. And that's really, Turkey is already occupying a bigger territory in Syria than anywhere in the world. Like Israel is not given anywhere close. Turkey is the biggest occupier of Arab territory anywhere in the world. They don't talk about that very often. When I come on, Arab media, they talk about the Israeli the occupation of the Golan Heights, whatever. So Turkey is right across there, occupying, much of northern Syria. Israel has been very open about trying to bring the Druze population closer to it, opening the gates for a visit. There's Druze in Israel and Druze people in Syria, visiting, mulling even the option of giving them work permits to work in Israel. And so the idea here is to create a corridor between Israel and Iran, from Israel to Iran through Syria, possibly even Iraq, with the Druze, the Kurds, and elsewhere in Syria and Lebanon, the Christians, the Yazidis in Iraq. So all these things are fascinating. They open up new opportunities. So we better not think only about Israel as a small country surrounded by enemies. There is a lot of different people in the Middle East we can do business with, and I hope we can do that. Please. How about you, Morgan? Yes.
Okay,
I just wanted to ask you hypothetically, God forbid, we wake up one morning 3 weeks from now, and Iran announces that it has detonated a nuclear weapon. I'm thinking of communist China, late 60s.
Right.
Does this just change everything? Does this basically say to Trump, you no longer have the option? And for example, Israel, you no longer have the option of launching some kind of a strike to
Right.
decimate these sites. Does that completely upend everything that we've seen the last few months with Iran and its allies just getting devastated?
Well, absolutely, you're right to be wary about this, and I think we should all be worried about this kind of scenario, and we should never get there. So in my mind, there is only one version of this, is that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon, whether or not, or the good way or the bad way. So in my view, and I have some, acquiescence with the Israeli and the American sort of military world and intelligence world, I don't believe that we'll get to a point where Iran is getting a nuclear weapon and it will be completely under the radar. I hope I'm not wrong. But then we can't take the bet. We can't can't take any chances here. In my view, it's either the good way or the bad way. Either the Iranians come to the table and negotiate really within a certain limited time frame and give up on their nuclear program, or Israel, the United States, and a coalition, maybe even with the participation or the tacit consent of Arab countries in the region, will take on the Iranian nuclear program. Please.
One quick question. Don't we run the risk every day that
Right.
we and US and or Israel don't do something? Don't we run a greater risk? It increases with every succeeding day.
Yeah.
Iran could have done things in this way.
Right, the clock is ticking. Absolutely, I agree with you. Time is not in our favor, and the sooner we act, the better, in my view. Please.
Lanny.
Oh, thank you so much for shedding light, which is your name, on
Thank
a
you.
very complex subject.
Right.
Norm and I watched in absolute horror a documentary I highly recommend to all of you called October 8th.
Mhm. Mhm.
It should be now available on streaming. We watched it in an empty movie theater. On October 8th, even before Israel started responding, on every campus in the United States,
Yeah.
they were organized, they had pamphlets, they
Right.
had placards, they had talking points. It was well organized.
Absolutely.
My question, as scary as that is, was Israel completely oblivious to it? And how did Israel, where I grew up, which was so good at seizing the initiative in Hezbollah, in information warfare, Israel invented it before anybody
Right.
in the United States spoke in those terms. How did Israel allow itself to lose that?
I think Israel was never particularly good at that, to be really honest. We were never particularly good at sort of making our case to the world. In general, good people have trouble in explaining themselves because bad people have so much more confidence. And we sort of want to stick to the truth. And then whenever somebody else is lying, we say, we'll check. I'll give you an example of the Al Ahli Arab Hospital in Gaza. I'm sure you're aware, October 2023, very early on in the war. And Israel reportedly bombed a hospital in Gaza, killing 500 people. And I checked the American media. And that's really, truly shocking when you see the headlines. Reported 500 killed, paragraph 17, asterisk, oh, according to local media reports. A few hours later, it turned out, oh, we're sorry, actually, there was a misfired rocket by a Palestinian faction. Nobody got hurt. On October 7 in the evening, do you know how many people we thought were killed in the attacks? 44. That was the figure in Israeli media. 44, not 1,200. So it's kind of a miracle that they know within a second that 500 people were killed. So my point is that whoever wants to go around and cheat will find someone who wants to be cheated, okay? And someone who wants to be lied to because it's convenient. That's the narrative. And what we failed at is to sell our goods, which is the best goods in the world, across the globe. Make our case. Hasbara, you mentioned, is a particularly bad way of doing that, in my opinion, not an ill-advised way. One professor I talked to phrased hasbara as bad propaganda. That's the official English translation. But we can call it advocacy. Yeah, right. We need to go around and win hearts and minds. We need to use influencers, particularly not the usual suspects, that is to say Israelis and Jewish people looking like me, but rather take on folks from the United States, across the United States, not necessarily Jewish, who are influencers, who go on social media, who reach millions of people like this with a single video, and sort of make our case to the world. What Israelis usually think should be going on is that to have an eloquent speaker behind a podium with an Israel flag behind him doesn't work. It doesn't work. And even there, if it does work, it gets to a very sort of narrow prism of audience on CNN or Fox or whatever. We need to go on social media. We need to win hearts and minds. We need to sort of bring sort of the moral question out there with folks, like Christians who see how Israel treats Christians as opposed to other places in the Middle East and Palestinian territories, LGBTQ people, about all these people who are truly concerned themselves with these human rights issues and don't realize yet that Israel is on their side. So I think that's what we should be hammering in, and I hope we do it.
Okay, I'm going to take Mike and then Nick.
So you alluded a couple of times, there's just also a follow-on to the October 8th. It all comes together. It's not just Iran, it's Russia and China.
Right.
Who are at war with the West.
Right.
And Israel is on a front line with that Russia-China situation, and much of the things on college campuses grow out of decades about things about settlers and colonialism, and it's decades of very far left-wing propaganda that has come together there. Can Israel have a strategy? What would that strategy be for dealing with something that is a war on Western development culture situation that is not limited to Israel? It's really much broader than Israel.
Yeah, it should paint Israel as part of the Western hemisphere, as part of the Western world, or the West, part of the free world, if you will. And what Russia and China are doing with Iran is these disinformation campaigns. Remember, I talked about the KGB officer, Bezmenov, who talked about ideological subversion. So ideological subversion, in their mind, is to go into the United States and sort of hammer away these fault lines. So Israel sort of, because we are good people, and because people who seek emet, who seek truth, don't often find themselves lying or sort of, going sort of, spiral ways. They go right at duch to explain it to you. We often fail to realize how much people want not to be explained. People want to be swayed. You want to win hearts and minds. That's what we really want to do. You want to bring college students to Israel for trips, and then to win hearts and minds, we're going to take Israeli students out to campuses for other people to meet Israelis, like my peers from Sciences Po met me. And so this is really what we should be doing, not as much as going on live TV, as much as it's great, and have an eloquent speaker with a suit and tie and a podium and a flag of Israel, but rather really win hearts and minds. Russia and China are very good at it. Just give an example of TikTok. I don't know if you know, but it's an affiliate of Douyin, the Chinese company. It makes Chinese youngsters who are using Douyin are limited to 40 minutes per day. It's all educational content, and then they go on. They go on taking swimming lessons and piano lessons and chess lessons, and very often what happens is the young people in America who are heavily addicted to social media go like this for 9 hours a day, watching a cat spinning a ball or something, and that's really what they aim to do, to sort of affect internally and domestically the West and tear it from within. That's really the danger here.
Let me just say, George Gilder wrote a brilliant book in 2010 called The Israel Test, in which he explains how a lot of this left-wing stuff came together and the international thing. And if you haven't read it, you really should read it because it turns out to be a great explanation. We're coming close to the end of the formal program. I'm going to give Nick a question, and we're saving the best for last down there, Steve. And
Right.
then we'll go informal. Nick?
Yeah, thank you for this very interesting talk. I could say a lot, but I'll say two things. Well, one thing, and then I have a question. You gave a perfect example of the buying into misinformation,
Right.
because you said there are 2 million people living in Gaza. No one knows how many people are living in Gaza because there's never been a census.
Right.
And
Right. Absolutely.
Israel could do the world a big favor
Right.
by putting together an internationally respectable group of census takers to take a census. And while they're at it,
Full on. I agree.
count
stop.
up the bodies of the dead and wounded and how they came to be dead and wounded, because the numbers all come from Hamas. My question has to do with the tunnels.
All right.
My understanding is, and the question is this correct, that they're all so booby-trapped that it's very dangerous to send troops in, and that's one of the reasons why Hamas isn't finished off as a fighting force in Gaza. Is that true?
That's what I mentioned, the tunnels. That's the main challenge of Israel in Gaza. I think that's the main reason why they're still infighting in Gaza. Not only booby-trapped, but deep underground, 40, 50 meters underground. You don't really know how long it takes. I spoke directly to combatants and officers who said this is our main challenge here, because you try to sort of work it out. I don't know if you saw the videos of Okets, the elite unit who uses dogs as a means of combat, sending them down these tunnels. Other ways is sort of to clear the tunnels. They started flooding them with the ocean water at some point. Try to deal with them in all sorts of ways. That did find technologies to deal with them, but it's still extremely complicated. If you saw how in the Arnon operation, what we call, how Noar Gamani, the hostage, was rescued alongside 3 other hostages. They were kept in an apartment building. Same for the 2 Argentinian Israeli individuals who were rescued. All these people were rescued from a surface level, first floor, second floor, what have you, apartment buildings, not from tunnels. And so Hamas knows full well that it's kind of a blind spot for Israel. For years, the IDF said they were surprised by the extent of the tunnels. And had it not been for the tunnels, we kind of always focused on what we call offensive tunnels that are crossing from Gaza to Israel. That's how Gilad Shalit was kidnapped 12 years ago, 15 years ago, by crossing into Israel with an offensive tunnel. And so Israel built a fence, $3 billion, an underground fence to block these. And what did Hamas do? Dig in tunnels, like what they call defensive tunnels inside Gaza. And it really complicates the fighting. That's the main challenge. But unlike most militaries in the world, the IDF is capable of dealing with it. That's more complicated than Mosul, more complicated than any other urban fighting in history, and that's quite extraordinary.
Steve.
Does Israel have the military capability to wipe out the Iranian nuclear program? If Israel doesn't have it itself, does Israel, in combination with the United States, have military capability?
Right. So the people I spoke to in IDSF who are familiar with the sort of with the details, in their view, Israel is capable of taking on Iranian nuclear facilities, has the capability. Although they do add that with the help of the United States, it's going to be much easier, much far less complicated. The United States, in my view, has the capability of taking it down. The only question is, what's next? What's the day after going to look like? What I said earlier was that Iran is the most dangerous point in history, but also at its weakest point, because as you can tell, it's uranium enrichment is at a record level, but its defenses are crumbling, and Hamas, Hezbollah, all the proxies are mostly decimated, and so it's almost completely exposed. And so the only question right now is how will Iran react? We saw when it tried to retaliate and sort of to attack Israel with twice. In April and October of 24, I remember we all went to the shelter. All over Israel, there were siren alerts, red alerts, and Iran failed. Iran failed. Israel's air defense proved to be exquisite and almost spotless. Many of these were downed by Arrow 2, Arrow 3. Some of these were downed by F-35 planes. And the United States also participated. Reportedly, there was also what we call MEAD, the Middle East Air Defense, with the radars spread across the region, helping. I can assume that they are in Arab countries, if that's across the region, providing an intel. So my point is that when when our interests align between Israel and the Arab world, there we can see the opportunities. Then you can see the fault lines between sort of the dilemma of the Arab world. We all remember the Khartoum Declaration, the 3 no's, no to recognition of Israel, and so on. It's not there anymore. The Arab world understands that Iran and not Israel is the main danger hovering above its head. And what Arab leaders want most of all is stability, to preserve their regimes. The way to do that used to be bashing Israel. The way to do that now is getting closer to Israel and sign the Abraham Accords in 2020. Hopefully, they will be expanded to peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, opening up trade routes with IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, really stabilize the Middle East. The way to do that, in my view, taking on Iran would end the war and not start a new war. It would end the war by sort of putting in a box the Iranian challenge, bringing Arab countries closer to Israel and the United States to form an Israeli-Arab-American coalition. That can happen if we tackle Iran. If we fail to tackle Iran, they will behave like they behaved in the past few years, where they sort of send their ambassadors back to Tehran, try to cozy up with the dictators of Tehran because they felt threatened. If the danger is removed, then we can open up to peace in the Middle East, or at least more stability in the Middle East. I understand that's all the time we have, but I'm very happy to stay here, of course. I can never skip the food. And it's been a great pleasure talking to you.
So
Thank you.
you touched on one of the two most
Please.
important things I was going to say.
Right.
One is that there's a ton of food left, and I know not everybody's eaten, so, please, after we're done, food. But the other is to say that when we do these programs normally, I ask the speaker to make the last statement something optimistic.
Right.
And I think you just did it. I don't have to ask you. I
Right.
think there is opportunity in a lot of what you've said, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it on behalf of everybody. You could clap now. I appreciate what we learned, and I appreciate the perspective, so that now when we go and look at the news reports, and now when we go and click through our social media, we have a better basis
Right.
for understanding. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was really great.
Thank you very much.